Welcome back to GA Fan TV. My name is Aaron. I'm delighted to be joined here by Conor McKenna for a preview of this weekend's All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship action. We're going to be looking ahead to the action in the Munster Hurling Championship. Obviously, two big games there. Cork taking on Tipperary, Waterford playing Clare as well, and three games happening in Leinster as well to discuss. We'll be looking at some of the games in the Joe McDonagh as well. So plenty to break down. Obviously, match day 3 in both Leinster and Munster, so really beginning to heat up now, and it certainly is at the stage where we might even see some teams possibly eliminated this weekend. Conor, how's life for yourself?
Yeah, good, Aaron, yourself?
Yeah, going well. Enjoying things. I suppose. How have you found the hurling championship so far? I know you've obviously been away, sort of covering Kerry, obviously in the Joe McDonagh a little bit, but how have you found it? Like, it's been, I suppose it's been very fascinating so far. I mean, Limerick getting beat last week, that was a big surprise in most people's eyes.
Yeah, I think I've watched every game in the hurling championship that's been on available for streaming. Been to a few Joe McDonagh games. Yeah, no, it's been a great championship. To be honest with you, I've watched far more hurling than I've watched football this year. Do you know, I watched the matches last weekend, the two of them in Munster and the one in Leinster that was televised. I just think it's been a very, very good championship so far. I think the Munster Championship offers far more than Leinster. In fact, I think it's quite unevenly balanced, you know. But I do think that this week, that, like, I suppose I hate giving cliches, but I was just saying to someone earlier, the Munster Championship, it kind of feels like every game almost is knockout from here onwards, because if every team loses a match, then suddenly they're under a lot of pressure. Like, you know, I don't think you could say the same for the Leinster Championship, to be honest, at this stage. Although on the other hand, I think to contrast to that is the reward for winning the Leinster Championship is getting to an All-Ireland semi-final and probably avoiding the Munster champions at minimum, like, which I suppose the last 4 years has been Limerick. So I suppose the team that won the Leinster Championship the last 4 years would have avoided Limerick. And I suppose probably interesting, Galway failed to win a Leinster Championship in the last 4 years. So probably Galway, that would be something that would be a source of regret for Galway. But yeah, no, all in all, it's been very, very good so far, you know.
Yeah, and I suppose I know obviously Limerick aren't playing this weekend. Obviously, they're obviously the side that's the odd one out. Obviously for this weekend that's sitting this game out. But yeah, like, I mean, what were your thoughts obviously on that defeat to Clare? I mean, it was as we said, like, I mean, when you look at a lot of Limerick's games last year, like, they were very close, and Clare nearly beat them on more than one occasion. But I think for Clare to go and beat them in the Gaelic grounds, like, it felt like some statement. And obviously the first time they've gotten beat in the championship since 2019, and like Limerick, we were thinking they were going to beat Kilkenny's record, but I suppose Clare had other ideas.
Yeah, I just actually seeing there, Limerick GA have just released a statement saying Sean Finn is suffered a serious injury, is out for the rest of the season. So that's a huge blow. I think I have probably been on record to say I don't think I was one of those people that thought Limerick was getting far too much hype. I think that last year they played 7 championship matches. I think 5 of them were within 3 points or less, like the total margin, you know, like they were kind of clinging on to win a few games. The 2 championship performances this year from Limerick have been poor. I think the first day against Waterford, Limerick might have been slightly a better team, but Waterford certainly had more than enough chances to win that game. I think last week against Clare was far the better team. I think the 1 point winning margin didn't do Clare justice at all, you know. So I think Limerick, things are not going to plan. And I do think that, like, John Kiley has come out and spoken and probably did the same as me, that he didn't think that he didn't believe this hype about Limerick, you know. But, like, I suppose if that is the case, then surely he would have probably planned for a situation where they were going to lose a game, you know. And if he's planned for a situation to lose the game, last weekend shouldn't be any more than just a roadblock, like a traffic light on the, you know. But, like, I do think probably ever since they won the All-Ireland, the first All-Ireland, certainly ever since losing to Kilkenny in 2019, I think this is definitely the biggest challenge he'd have faced as Limerick manager, is what they do now. Because it's not an impossible situation that if Tipperary were to turn over Limerick the next day, that Limerick's faith could be out of their own hands before playing Cork in the last round, where even a win mightn't do them. I know there's been many an instance in the new round robin format, even in its infancy years, where a team has been knocked out on 4 points. You think back to 2019 with Clare. I think Galway got knocked out with 5 points, which is even more one year. Dublin last year were knocked out, having got 6 points in Leinster, which is probably the same as 4 points in Munster. So if Limerick lose to Tipperary, it's very much on the cards. Now, I think that match I like the phrase is must not lose. So like a 1 point would probably suit Limerick. And I suppose, we'll probably touch on Cork and Tipperary in a while, but it's very much Limerick are probably they're probably not in a great place, and I think a lot of this is kind of, I don't know, has the arrogance come from within the camp? But like I heard a few people saying, and probably rightly saying, the narrative at the time was Limerick are going to take up one place in Munster, and there's 14 playing for the other two places, And it's certainly not a narrative that has helped Limerick at all. Like there probably was a bit of complacency has kicked in, and it's probably the killer in any walk of life, So, very much. We're set for a brilliant Munster championship, to be honest,
Absolutely, and definitely be interesting. All right, to keep an eye on them, obviously in the coming weeks. But obviously they'll be sitting back and watching this weekend's action and seeing how it unfolds. And I suppose, as you mentioned there, Cork versus Tipperary is obviously a big heavyweight clash. Like when you look at the history of these two counties, obviously down the years, Cork and Tipperary both starting their seasons with a win, only having played one game. So yeah, huge match, and whoever takes the 2 points here could take a huge step towards getting out of Munster.
Yeah, well, I suppose this is a huge game, really. Like I suppose in the sense that if Cork win this game, I think they'll probably need another point somewhere. If Tipperary win this game, well, they probably will need another point. But I think if Tipperary win this game, you'd very, very much expect them to get out with the group at minimum. And I suppose then Tipperary can very much look in the short term at reaching a Munster final. While I think the winner of this game, whether it's Cork or Tipp, is going to be in a very good position to get out with the group, especially in top three. And then I suppose in that sense, you can look at, as mentioned, you can look at more targets, start planning the year, a bit of a roadmap. You get out with the group first, and then you can start focusing on other things, But I suppose the loser of this game, in contrast, is very much in a position where they're in big jeopardy. I suppose just in a hypothetical situation, that Tipperary were to lose this game, then suddenly Limerick and Tipp becomes an even bigger game. If it's a situation where Cork lose this game, then if they lose in Ennis, they're going to have to go to Gaelic grounds out with their own hands. So I suppose I hate using cliches, Aaron, as I mentioned, but I think this really feels like, if not a knockout game, the next level. It kind of feels like an old big Munster championship game. Is what this feels like. It feels like a game where in the old format, where I suppose. See, the fact neither team has lost, they're probably both in carbon copy situations where they've both won a match. Cork were in a similar position to where Waterford were after week one, with the exception of having 2 points on the board, because Cork played very well against Waterford. Everything went to plan, but they still only have 2 points. And I thought the same with Waterford the week before. Waterford played very well, did everything right against Limerick, they would have thought, but they still came out with the match with no points on the board. Do you know the kind of way? The fact that Cork played so well against Waterford isn't going to matter at all if they lose against Tipperary. So it's very much should be a great game. But I suppose I thought Pat Ryan got all of his tactics right against Waterford. I thought that the way he picked the team, Stubbs were set up very well. I thought Cork seemed to get everything right. And I just think they have a good few lads coming back. I think the likes of Robbie O'Flynn, Shane Kingston were introduced off the bench the last day. And the likes of Tim O'Mahony is probably going to come back. Alan Connolly might be back. Mark Coleman, to name a few. So I think Cork are a team just waiting in the long grass. And I think they're the one team that if they do get out with the group in top three, they could really come with a serious stab at winning the All-Ireland this year. But I think Cork's biggest challenge is probably in the short term is to get in that top three. Well, I think Tipperary, everything they've done this year has been positive. They have a superb management team with Liam Cahill. He's proven that in every job, I think, even going back to his days as a club manager. They seem to really have a clear style about how they're going to play, where they're going. And I suppose I was down in Thurles maybe 12 months ago, I think. I think it was the weekend of the 21st, 22nd of May last year. Tipperary played Cork. Cork hockeyed them in Thurles. Just Tipp looked like a county who did not know what they were doing. Like they were just so poor, And I think the thing to do with Liam Cahill, it's just turned on its head so much in a year. Like Tipp have just seemed in such a much better place, And that's going to be a great game between Tipperary and Cork. And I have a GA Go subscription, and I absolutely will make sure I'm going to be tuned into that game on Sunday evening.
Yeah, me too. Definitely, very much looking forward to it. What have you made of Cork at times this year? Because as you said there, when you look at their team, when you look at the options of players that they have available, they do have so many players, under 20s, obviously making the breakthrough, plenty of underage success as well. Still have the likes of Patrick Horgan and obviously Shane Kingston knocking around as well. But at the same time, they are quite inconsistent, and you never quite know what you're going to get with them. Against Kilkenny, they were fairly flat at times, but you go back to the start of the league. Second half performance against Limerick was unbelievable. And then against Waterford, they showed some good moments. But again, they weren't exactly brilliant. Like, it was probably more about Waterford being quite poor on the day. So, like, with Cork, there does seem to be a lot of inconsistency about them, which I'd imagine would worry their supporters at the same time.
Yeah, I think if I was a boxing promoter and there was a team, a young talent team I would like to sign up, it would be Cork, to be honest with you. You know, like, I think they're the Olympic gold medalists that everyone wants to sign, kind of. And I suppose if I was a manager in hurling, which I'm not, they'd be the one team I'd like to take over if I got a chance, to be honest. You know, the type of way, like, so I think that's definitely it. Now, I will say one thing, and it's one thing that I dislike about the GA is that there's so many meaningless matches. Like, I just think the league this year, we just learned nothing at all from a Cork perspective. I just think if Limerick don't get out of the group this year, the league is going to be even devalued even more. Like, it'll be probably the third year in a row where a league winner has flopped, if you include Galway in 2021. I think they were joint winners, you know, like, so I just think the first chance, honestly, my honest opinion, in the first real thing we saw Cork was last weekend against Waterford, and they passed the test. Like, but I just think in the GA we have such a small sample size of games to go on currently, because the hurling league is just not. I hate saying it's not relevant, even though that's probably right, to be honest. You know, the type of way, like, you know, and like the match Cork against Kilkenny was a terrible game of hurling in a lot of ways in hindsight. And it was the same with the league final. They just don't do it for me, to be honest with you, you know. But yeah, Cork, very much a team in the right direction, I suppose, going back and to answer your question. And I suppose, like, they're probably a team, if you offered Pat Ryan, would he take third place now and be out with the Munster Championship? I think he probably would. It's not that winning a Munster title wouldn't mean it to Cork, it would mean an awful lot. But I think that he's probably thinking, with the injuries back, if they get out with the group and have everyone fit, they'll give the All-Ireland Series a right stab. And I just think probably it's a bit of a broader point going back on what teams would take third place. Limerick definitely, even though the 5 Munsters in a row would be a big thing, I think they're very much focused on the All-Ireland. So I'd say John Kiley would bite your hand off for third. I'd say Pat Ryan would definitely take it. I'd say Waterford would definitely take it, even though it's probably unlikely. I think Tipperary probably wouldn't take it. Cal's a very ambitious manager. I'd say he'd like to win a Munster Championship. And I'd say Clare would take it unwillingly. They would take it, but wouldn't be happy to take it. I think they haven't won a Munster since 1995. So they're one county that would love to win a Munster title, are Clare, you know. Well, so yeah, I suppose Cork, going back at that, yes, in my opinion, a very genuine All-Ireland contender, but we remains to be seen if they fulfil their long-lived potential.
Yeah, and I suppose Tipperary are probably similar. Like, it's probably two similar counties, like Tipperary at the same time, plenty of underage success. I mean, the only difference is they've already all-Ireland winners in their side, in Shamie Callan and Jason Ford and all these lads. They've plenty of great players, and obviously, as you said, like, Liam Cahill's come in, I suppose, really galvanised the county in a similar way to the way he did Waterford. And like, when you look at it from a Liam Cahill point of view, and you look at it from a Tipperary point of view, like, they'll fancy their chances as well. And if they can turn over Cork, like, it gives them a huge opportunity at really doing something special. And I'm sure, like, a county like Tipperary, like, they'll be looking at an All-Ireland as well. Like, at the end of the day, they were the last county other than Limerick to win it.
Yeah, I think this is one of the games where, while the manager probably wouldn't admit this, if you were looking at it logically, I'd say if you offered both managers a draw before the game, they'd bite your hand off. I think a draw actually suits both teams down to the earth. Do you know, like, I think a draw would actually be the result. I think both teams, and it will keep momentum going for both teams. And it's funny because when Limerick team was in their infancy in 2018, they went down to Páirc Uí Chaoimh and it was a draw, and then Limerick beat them later on in the year. I think Aaron Gillan was sent off that day, and it was a turning point for that Limerick team in a lot of ways. Like, it kind of said, we're not going to be beaten here, like, no matter what the elements are. And I suppose it became a trait that probably was the embellishment of this Limerick team over the last few years, is able to stand up and hold out and win tight games, you know. So I suppose this is probably Tipperary be thinking the same. And I suppose the big difference in 2018 was, while it was a young Cork team in the sense there was a lot of lads being blooded, that I think they were blooded in 2017 for the first year, it was still very much not, it wasn't a very young Cork team. There was a lot of experienced players on the Cork team. While now I think both of these teams that you mentioned are similar. And I suppose any Cork hurling fanatic will name every All-Ireland recent underage win in recent years, but Tipperary hurling fanatics mightn't, because there's been too many to count nearly going back to 2005. Like, Tipperary have their underages is a good bit ahead of Cork's how successful they've been, you know. So I think both of these counties really, this should be a great game of hurling. It's the game of the weekend, and it's two teams I'd expect to make a serious impact of the championship come later on in the year.
Yeah, ultimately, then, what are you thinking, or what are you predicting? I mean, it's a hard one to call, to be honest with you. As you said, it could possibly even be a draw.
Yeah, if I was probably pushed to pick a winner, I'd probably edge towards Tipperary, to be honest with you. Maybe a bit narrow win for Tip, but yeah, it's funny because if Cork, like similar to what I was saying about Cork and Waterford, if Cork were to get a big beating against Tip, it would undo the very good performance against Waterford, and likewise, vice versa. If Tip were to get a big beating, it would undo the good work against Clare. A great win, and it's the first day for Tip, and the Clare match was a bit funny. The GAO didn't see it. Don't think it worked on the app in the first half, so I only saw the second half, which the game was nearly over as a contest. But it was a funny game because while Tip were probably definitely the better team, Clare, I think, only for a few very soft goals, and we could have won this game. Do you know, like, so it was a funny, very funny sort of game, hard reading into it, you know. But Tip are a team going well now. I suppose the big conundrum in the room at the moment is Waterford, Aaron, and I suppose they're not playing this weekend, so it's hard to kind of to get into them. But like, if Waterford were to lose to Clare, then suddenly the Tipperary Waterford game in the last round is a dead rubber match, like only for Liam Cahill. Like, will he want to put Waterford out, and maybe if there's a chance to put a record defeat for Tipperary over Waterford, would he really go for it? I'm not sure. But like, what I mean is, if Tipperary got a draw against Cork, hypothetically, and Waterford were to lose to Clare, then suddenly Tip would go into the Limerick game knowing that they'd have a safety net of a game that's dead rubber for Waterford in the last round, and that if they lost to Limerick, like the pressure, if Tipperary win this weekend, for example, and Clare were to lose against, or Clare were to beat Waterford, then suddenly Tip will be thinking, there's a 98% chance we're going to be in the championship regardless of whether we lose to Limerick. And in fact, if they beat Cork, they'll be thinking there's a 98% chance we're going to be in the Munster final, whether or not we lose to Limerick or not. So I think while Cahill will never say this publicly, or Tipperary won't say it publicly, if Tip beat Cork this weekend, they'll have one eye on a Munster final, I think, to be honest, on their preparations. That'll kind of be very much in the back of their thoughts. And I think that's something that may or may not worry John Kyle. Like, would Tip play better if they, like, would Tipperary be better having, I won't say having nothing to play for against Limerick because it's not strictly true, but having, like, would they be better off having Tipperary playing for their lives, or a Tipperary team where their lives aren't dependent on it? So maybe it won't make much difference, to be honest with you. But look, it's all to play for ahead of this weekend. But I'd probably, if I was pushed, I'd probably edge towards Tip, just considering Cork's injuries.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think when you look at Tipperary's body of work throughout the league, I think the preparation under Liam Cahill, and as you said, although like the three goals, the three opening goals they scored against Clare was obviously probably more down to goalkeeping errors from the Clare keeper, but at the same time, it was that pressure from pressing up and causing the turnovers that eventually caused the goals. In fairness, Keane says here, Cork v Tipperary promises to be a cracker. Whoever wins this clash will be my favourites for the Munster title. Tipperary are my tip to win it. Yeah, no, I'd back Tipperary as well. I think I'd agree with what you've said there, Connor. I think it'd be probably a close game, 1 or 2 points. But I don't think you'd be hugely surprised even if Cork won the game as well, in fairness. I suppose the other game then in Munster's a huge one as well. Obviously, Waterford versus Clare. Waterford lost, of course, have lost their opening 2 matches. So a defeat here would they would be very much gone, if not already. And Clare, obviously, I mean, as we said, what a story, what a win it was for them in the Gaelic rounds. And, I'd imagine confidence and everything else is definitely going to be flying in that camp at the minute.
Yeah, well, I just think the biggest issue for Waterford, in my opinion, a huge issue, I would say, is that we're seeing there on the screen Waterford versus Clare as a home match, and it's being played in Thurles. Like, Waterford need to sort some of this. Now, maybe it's the last year Walsh Park is going to be done, but Waterford needs to be playing at home. And, like, this might sound illogical, but if I was the Waterford County Board this year, I would have lobbied. Now, I don't know how they did the lobby, but I would have really pushed to play the home matches in Dungarvan, to be honest with you. I would not have agreed to play them in Thurles. I don't think it was a good idea at all. And, like, I just think that Waterford, this is not a home game for Waterford at all. Like, I'm not great on geography, but, like, if you look at the road, if you do Thurles to Waterford or Thurles to Clare in Google Maps, that's it. A lot of parts of Clare will be closer, if not, like, so it's not a home match for Waterford, no matter what way they look at it. Now, Waterford might think that they have their Thurles is a home game, but I don't think it is at all. I think it's very much a neutral game, and I do think what's an absolute certainty is after Clare's win the last day, there will be far more Clare fans in Thurles than there will be Waterford fans. Do you know, like, it was embarrassing from Waterford perspective, the difference in support between Limerick and Waterford when they met in Thurles. It must have been 8 or 9 to 1. Like, you can understand it in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. It's a home match for Cork, who are probably the best supported county in Ireland, the home in hurling. But I think that it's not. This is not a home game. If anything, it's a home game for Clare. Aaron, I think last year, and Clare will just be thinking, like, what way are they getting the dice rolling for them? Because last year Cork gave up home advantage to play them in third. Clare won that game. This year, Waterford, which is a different scenario, I accept, because the Walsh Park is getting redeveloped, but Waterford, Clare for the second year in a row are only going to play one away match, and ironically, they've actually won that away match in Gaelic grounds. And now, I suppose, with the risk of hypocrisy, because they got a good beating in their home match against Tipp, I often think when a ground is full like that, it's worth another 5-6 points to players a home ground full. I just thought the last day, Porky full, it must have been Waterford, must have been a few points down before they even started, to be honest. You know the type of way, like, and I suppose even in the Gaelic grounds the last day, Clare played much better, but they still only won by a point. Like naturally, like, you're going to get a bit more breaks when there's a big crowd on your back. Like, you know the type of way, that's just the way it works naturally. You know the type of way, like, the 50-50 balls become 55-45 or whatever. Like, you know, like, sometimes they get the decisions. Like, you know, it's the home advantage. I think it's a bigger factor, and it can't be understated, you know. And I just think, like, Brian, obviously there's the low hand Davy Fitz. Like, it's probably, to be honest with you, it's getting a bit like Saipan at this stage. It probably needs to be forgotten about. It's talked about too much, you know, like, but it does add something to the game. But like, I suppose Clare are going to be very motivated for this, and like, to be honest with you, like, this is never going to be said, but I said it to someone today, like, if Waterford were offered a 2 or 3 point defeat here, I'd say that they mightn't be too far away from taking it. Now, they're not going to ever say we're going to accept to lose the game, but like, last year in Ennis, Clare's B team, essentially, they rested about 5 or 6 key players, absolutely hammered a good Waterford team. So, like, I think this game is huge for Waterford hurling. Like, very few are expecting to win, but I think they need a performance. Like, if they don't get a performance, then that could be, like, Waterford hurling could be set back a long way. Because if they lose this by 10 points, like they did last year against Clare's, a fringe Clare team, then suddenly you're playing Tipp in third in the next game. Tipp could absolutely run riot altogether. So this is a huge game, not so much to win. I think even if Waterford were to win their last 2 games, they still mightn't get out of the group. So I think this year Waterford are, like, at risk of being probably completely shown up. I think you could almost say Waterford are out of the championship, to be honest with you. Do you know the type of way? Like, it would take a huge series of results to go right for them to win in All Ireland at this stage, and it would be one of the real comebacks. Do you know the type of way? Like, so, well, like, I'm going to say with 99% certainty Waterford aren't going to win in All Ireland this year. Do you know, like, but I do think they need to take something. Like, I think Waterford are all put out of the Munster Championship anyway. So unless they win in All Ireland, it'll be a trophy this season. Do you know? So, like, this is the games where they need to restore credibility in the Waterford jersey. And, you know, probably a bit like Donegal in football. Like, it hasn't gone to plan, but like, it's not out. They're not just out yet, but it's a performance the next day that is absolutely essential, you know?
Yeah, like, and where do you think it's even gone wrong for Waterford? Like, it was only probably 18 months ago, or maybe even 14 or 15 months ago, before the start of last year's championship, where everyone was very much anticipating that Waterford were going to be the closest challengers to Limerick. Like, I remember Derek McGrath, he's saying that, you know, the only other team other than Limerick to be walking up the Hogan stand is going to be Waterford. And you could understand why. Like, I don't think anyone really hugely disagreed with him at the time. And I know obviously there's been a change in management since then, but at the same time, like, I know Davy Fitz gets a good amount of criticism at times. And like, but when you look at it, like, when you look at what he's achieved, winning a Munster title with Waterford before, Leinster title with Wexford, All Ireland with Clare, clearly is a top class manager. And I don't know what it is, but there just seems to be a huge amount of flatness with Waterford. Like, the fact they didn't score their first point from play against Cork until I think the 23rd minute. Like, and that's crazy to think about some of the players and talent that they have, and even young Pat Fitzgerald, who's made the breakthrough as well. Like, so there's there's a huge amount of players there with Waterford, but for whatever reason, it's completely gone wrong. And where do you think it's gone wrong?
Yeah, I suppose, again, at risk of being a bit hypocritical, because I was probably critical of the hurling league earlier, but Waterford have won 2 matches this year in the league, and they've both been not so convincing wins against Leitch and Antrim in the league. Now, look, I don't want to be kind of too harsh on Waterford, because, to be fair, they played very well against Limerick the week before and could have won. So I don't think the whole season has unfolded unraveled in a week, to be honest with you. But I do think that the issues, though, are very, very deep in Waterford. Like, if you just look at 2 facts I'm going to throw out, they've won 2 of their last 19 Munster Championship matches, you know, and that's round robin or no round robin. So there's the Munster Championship record has been rubbish before this year. And also, like, another fact is they played 15 matches this year in the Munster Championship between under 17, under 20 and senior in football and hurling, and they've lost all 15. You know, so Waterford are really, really not in a good place as a GA county, it would look like from those facts, you know. And I'm open to correction on this, but I have a funny feeling that since they won the All-Ireland under 21 in 2016, the only team they've beaten in the Munster Championship since then at that level is Kerry. Now, I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think that the record at that level has not been good. So, look, I think Noel Connor said it in the Examiner during the week, that things could get very, very dark from a Waterford perspective, to be honest with you, over the next few years. I hope I'm wrong. I would not like to see the slip of the county at all, you know. I think for the sake of the Munster Championship, I hope that they don't go down that route, you know. But I just think Waterford, it just does not. It just, I don't know, there was talk of after they won the league last year, right? For talk that it was the best ever Waterford hurling team, and it was a better team than the team that in the noughties, you know, which I understood.
Yeah.
They had played very well league final, hammered Wexford in semi-final, and it just hasn't clicked for them. But look, I suppose without being too critical, I don't know where it's gone wrong. Maybe it's not gone that wrong. I was just saying there is another side to last week. The Cork were at home. First game were fresh. Waterford had given everything the week before, and it was just a game where Cork caught them and by surprise there, and the game was killed off the game. So look, we'll know next Saturday evening. I think the game we'll know next Saturday what level Waterford are at more. I suppose similar, we probably if I said we have a 1 game sample to judge Cork, and we probably have a 2 game sample to judge Waterford on. And to be fair, against Limerick, you would have given them pass marks. So they probably only have one match where they've really hasn't got to plan Waterford so far. But you look, are they in the championship? I'm not sure. Is this year going to come to anything yet? But no, I would imagine it's going to be a poor year and probably worse days to come, unfortunately, from a Deja perspective.
Yeah, Hurling 1 2 3 4 says here Desi Hutchinson, only Ballygunner player starting, and 9 in a row in Waterford, and obviously All Ireland champions 2 years ago as well. In fairness, and I've seen Pat Fitzgerald's playing a little bit. Not totally sure with some of the other lads there, but I suppose that is a surprise as well. The fact that there isn't more of them players starting. Yeah,
well, I think that's where I think there has to be a bit of an asterisk, Aaron, because this thing about Ballygunner being so dominant, I think it's it's good for Ballygunner, don't get me wrong. It's a super achievement, but it's absolutely no relevance to Waterford hurling in a lot of ways, because they're absolutely walking through championships at every age group. I just don't think that that's any sort. And I just think that it was the same when Armagh, when Crossmaglen were so dominant. And I suppose pick another county where one team is winning it without any major competition every year. It's not good for a county at all for that to be happening at all. And I think that's something that I think the Ballygunner thing is of absolutely no, to me, on a personal level, it's absolutely no relevance to Waterford fortunes, to be honest. You know, but I just think that it means, it's just the fact Ballygunner are good doesn't mean that Waterford hurling is in a good place. Now, it doesn't mean it's in a bad place either, but I don't like people overreacting to one thing like that, to be honest, you know.
Yeah, and I suppose from a Clare perspective, I suppose as Tom was saying here, didn't expect Clare to beat Limerick, so can't see anything but a Clare win over Waterford. Huge incentive for Clare to follow up their amazing win over Limerick with a win here. Waterford have been poor to something you don't associate with Davy Fitzgerald's teams. Clare to win by 4 points. And as we were saying with Clare, when you look at their team from 1 to 15, there was probably a narrative maybe 2-3 years ago that there was a bit of a over-reliance on Tony Kelly, and if Tony Kelly wasn't at his best, then Clare, that was the first sort of step towards beating Clare. But now we're seeing I don't think Tony Kelly's been poor or anything or anything of that nature, but I don't think he probably produced better performances maybe 2-3 years ago in terms of scoring wise. But I think what's happening now is Clare more of a team. You're getting Aidan McCarthy chipping in, Mark Rogers has looked very good, John Conlon obviously as well has been very impressive. Peter Duggan we've seen scored a fine goal the last day as well. So Clare have got a wealth of options, and not only should they be eyeing up a Munster, but I'm sure they're looking further towards an All-Ireland as well when you look at the team that they have.
Yeah, I think to be fair to Brian Lohan, the one thing I will say, in the 4 years since he's taken over at Clare, we've probably in the championship, in the league, again, the hurling league, it's so hard to really get into it, but just going back in the championship every year in the 4 years, and I suppose it looks to be this year included, we have seen noticeable improvement. There's signs of clear improvement from Clare. Do you know, so I think that's one thing I will say, to be fair to Brian Lohan, is this gradually is improving this Clare team. Do you know? So I think that, I'm not sure if they're an All-Ireland contender. I just think that we've often thought that, and you kind of get let down an awful lot. Do you know, kind of way, so I think the performance last year against Kilkenny was exceptionally poor. I think there was a very, very dark day for Clare hurling, to be honest with you. Like, it was just a total no-show. Like, and obviously now John Conlon going injured was a bad loss, but then you have to accept that you're going to get injuries. Like, and I think Lohan wouldn't probably use that as an excuse. Clare just didn't play well. He'd probably accept in hindsight that he got stuff wrong. It absolutely wasn't the sole reason for the win. The players didn't play well. Kilkenny just ambushed them with intensity. Kilkenny can do that. Like, it's probably the hallmark of Brian Cody team. So look, absolutely no, that's in the past and it's going to be no relevant to this year. But do I see Clare as All-Ireland contenders? I suppose they are contenders that they have to be, but would I expect them to win All-Ireland? No is the answer, to be honest with you. Now, and I do think, funny, if Clare were to get to a Munster final and avoid Limerick, that would be something that would be huge. What it would do is it would be really revive the Munster Championship. Not that it needs to be revived. Revive would suggest it's not good, but it is a great competition. But a non-Limerick final and having different winners, like, would really, really be good for Munster. Because I think Tipperary haven't won a Munster Championship in 7 years. Cork haven't won it in 5 years. Limerick have won 4 in a row. So any county, really, with the exception of Limerick, it would really, really be a good cause for celebration. So it would, but it was very good, very much something to look forward to. Is the Munster Championship? I think that's one thing with the Munster format. I think we'll very much see a position where if a team could end up coming third and be disappointed, like, which is good, which is what you want in the format. And that's, I suppose, we're here to talk hurling, but the football groups, whether you come third or second or first, I'm not so sure there's that incentive there, but there very much isn't the hurling, So, yeah, look, it's something to look forward to, definitely, from a Clare perspective,
Absolutely. And I suppose with the fact that even Limerick did get beat by Clare last week, and obviously Limerick's performance against Waterford on the opening weekend wasn't particularly brilliant. So, like, I think there probably is, like, the ears are probably raising, or the alarm bells are being raised a little bit for some of these counties like Clare and Cork and Tipperary, and they might actually see the pathway opening up to a Munster final. But what are you thinking then? I think we're both predicting Clare wins. In terms of margin of points, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think it's Saturday week, that game, isn't it? It's the 13th of May. I think that game is on the Clare Waterford, isn't it? So it's not this weekend, it's the weekend after. But yeah, I'd say Clare to win by 8 points, just to be different. I'd say around Clare by 7 or 8, to be honest.
100%. And I suppose looking at some of the games, obviously in Leinster, obviously Dublin versus Wexford, massive match, obviously for both of these two sides. I suppose from a Dublin perspective, a bit of a disappointed enough draw against Antrim, but I think Antrim have shown that they're probably a lot more at the level of Dublin and Wexford, looking at the last two performances than we would have expected. And then I suppose from a Wexford perspective, a big win versus Antrim as well. So you're looking at it and thinking it's a massive match, obviously, for both of these two sides. Yeah. And you get the feeling whoever's be here might be in a bit of trouble in terms of getting out of Leinster.
This is a funny match, Aaron. It's a match that means an awful lot that I'm not really looking forward to be honest. I just don't know how relevant these teams are to the All-Ireland Championship, to be honest. Like, I think Antrim drawn with Dublin was no fluke, and Antrim played very poorly against Wexford and still only lost by 4 or 5 points, So I think this is a funny type of game. Like, I'm not sure how good Dublin are, to be honest with you, and I'm not sure how good Wexford are. I think one move I don't understand on a personal level. I don't understand why Dublin opted to move this game to Croke Park. Like, if it was a case where Dublin were going to get a massive crowd that would outweigh Parnell Park, yes, but I don't think this is going to be the case. I just think Croke Park, this is not the type of game that should be in Croke Park, to be honest. Like, and I think it's going to be the same in the match against Galway, which could end up being a dead rubber game. So look, like, I will watch this game. I think the hurling chapter is good, but I don't know what it feels like. It just feels like a game that, while it's so important on paper, it just doesn't feel. It's just a game that's very hard to get excited about. Now, the other side to that is, on a personal level, just purely from a purely selfish point of view, I would kind of like to see Wexford winning this game on the basis that would likely make Wexford's game against Kilkenny in the last round a Leinster semi-final in Wexford Park, and that would be a good occasion. I don't think Dublin are going to win a Leinster title, to be honest with you. I don't think Dublin are going to beat Kilkenny in Nolan Park. They have a very good record against Galway, so I suppose if they do win this game, they could potentially target beating Galway in the last round, which would certainly be more realistic if Galway are already through to the final, which might be the case, So Dublin, it's a very hard game to call. Now, I don't like being negative on the teams, but my part line of this is that neither of these teams are going to win an All-Ireland title, so Leinster is the best hope. So coming third is not that really attractive for these teams in a lot of ways. Like, I put it this way, Aaron, if it's the Limerick and Tipperary is a Munster final and the third place team, the reward for or the punishment for losing is playing a quarter final against Dublin or Wexford. I just don't think that's going to be any sort of disincentive to those counties, to be honest with you. Do you know? So
yeah.
I think if I look, who do I think is going to win is probably the hard question. It's a very hard game to call, to be honest with you. You know, like Wexford haven't go well this year. Dublin kind of always flatter to deceive. I'm probably going to go with Dublin, to be honest with you. I don't think Dublin are great or anything, but it could be something that would give them a bit of this. I might just go for Dublin to edge this game, do you know?
Yeah, I suppose it's interesting, all right, because obviously all the talk is about the footballers coming out of Croke Park, and then they put the hurlers into Croke Park, but we probably actually don't want them in Croke Park. It's kind of a bit of a mad scenario, all right. But yeah, like I agree with you as well. Like I was a bit surprised, all right, when they did move them out of Parnell Park into Croke Park. Like I think that. I suppose the narrative really is that hurling attendances were really good in Parnell Park, but I think that was just because it was a smaller ground. Like I don't know if that's necessarily going to transcend into Croke Park, and then there's going to be more supporters and more fans. I'm not entirely sure what the whole aim is, but one thing for certain, anyway, it doesn't suit the team or the players. I think Parnell Park suits those players inside and out. Like it is a proper home ground. It's where the players would have played at club level for the entirety of their careers with Dublin, and now going into Croke Park, which probably in some ways might nearly feel like a neutral venue for Wexford, and that's why like they'll fancy their chances like coming to Croke Park.
Yeah, and just another thing about Dublin hurling. Now, the first thing is I've spoke to a lot of people that know a lot of people who are deeply involved, and they'd be steeped in real hurling people involved in Dublin hurling and Camogie. So it's absolutely not a criticism of Dublin hurling at all. It has good people. The clubs are good. But I just don't think there's much interest there. Like I chat to a lot of casual Dublin GA fans, and to be honest with you, they wouldn't even know this game is on hardly. Do you know the type of way? Like not that they wouldn't want Dublin to do well, but just like they wouldn't pay for it on GA Go and they wouldn't go to the match. If it was on RT free to air, they might watch it. They're doing nothing else. And like to be honest with you, Aaron, how many pubs in Dublin are going to pay for GA Go to put this on? Like they'd probably like you know the type of way. While I think in contrast, almost every pub in Cork and Tipperary would pay to put this on. Do you know? Like you know, I just don't think Dublin the hurling is that much interest in Dublin. And I understand that look, Dublin's big soccer. It's big with Gaelic football. Is the big game. Leinster rugby is big. They like the box and like Katie Taylor's fight will draw a big interest there. But I just don't know how big hurling is in Dublin now, and that's not being critical at all. But I just think like. The only thing I could see if Dublin, the hurling really kicking off in Dublin is if they win in All Ireland, which I don't think is going to happen at all, to be honest. You know, and like it just doesn't seem to work. And there's probably a tendency to hype up Dublin hurlers, and they've done absolutely nothing to justify the big hype, to be honest. You know, like I think that Wexford and Dublin it's not a game that gets the pulse racing, to be honest. Like I just don't see these teams being in the business end now, and like I could be totally wrong, but like to be fair, Wexford they produced a big display to win in Nolan Park against Kilkenny last year, and then they produced a big display. Could have beaten Clare in the All Ireland quarter final, but no, just this game isn't for me, and I just probably fancy Dublin to edge it.
Yeah, no, like I'd agree as well. I do think that like the vast majority, like from speaking to Dublin fans as well, is that there is a lot of them definitely that are hugely passionate about hurling, but I think there is a good majority of them, all right, that probably are more casual sort of fans. And I think, as you said, like winning a Leinster championship or getting to a final or something of that nature, I think would be huge for the county, in particular winning it, because even 2013, like even for myself personally, I was more of a casual hurling fan probably back then. Like I watched the All-Ireland semi-final and final, but then when 2013 came around, I got hugely interested in it. And then all of a sudden I was following Dublin really closely for, up since then, really. So like I do agree with you. I think like something huge needs to happen for Dublin hurling, and like they've had plenty of club success. Obviously, Kilmacud Crokes have looked strong last couple of years. Coola won a couple of All Irelands, but yeah, like the underage isn't too bad either. But it just seems like we can't seem to quite get big results. And I think the problem a lot of the time as well is when we play Kilkenny. I know we beat Galway a few times, but when we're playing a lot of these big sides, we are getting blown away, and I think that's not a good sign either for casual fans who are tuning in, probably going to tune out if they're losing by 10, 15 points,
I'm Westmeath. Like, to be honest with you, I don't like Westmeath is the same, but football is very much the big game in the county, and hurling is good in Westmeath under it. Probably could argue better than football, but the football is the big game there, and I suppose in Dublin, football is the bigger game out of the two, and that's not what I'd like. There'd be a lot of people in Westmeath and Dublin, like probably around that low, maybe I think your ancestral home around that part of the county where like Cork and Tipperary will be a much bigger draw than Westmeath and Galway on Saturday, and that's to be expected. Now, having said that, like Westmeath and Galway is not going to be a great game. Like hopefully Westmeath win, don't get me wrong, but they're not going to be Galway. Westmeath have made a lot of progress, but they're missing a few key player injuries, so they're not going to be Galway. Galway are a good team, so realistically now I hope I'm very wrong there. Like they do beat them, but it's probably not. Like it's just I just think, Aaron, I'm just thinking like I would have been one of those people that was critical about ticket prices before in the past and everything. But I suppose I'm just starting to kind of think, do you know what? If you don't like the ticket price, don't go. Like no one's putting a gun to your head to go either. It's the other thing. Do you know the type of way? Like, and if it's a good game and you go to the game, you'll feel you got value for money. But like, to be honest with you, you can probably say Galway Westmeath is not going to be a good game. Like, so like if you're paying €25 to go in and watch that game, I think that's the price of a stand ticket. It's 15 for the Terrace anyway. Like, are you going to pay €25 and come out of it thinking that was money well spent? Probably not, is the honest answer. Do you know the type of way? Like, and that's the other thing. But I suppose the other side of that is no one's forcing you to pay that money. Like, and I suppose it's the other thing, And to be fair to the GA, they probably can't go on. I think we're going to say we'll charge €50 for Galway Kilkenny and only get $5 for Galway Westmeath. The type of way. I don't think they can price matches like that. But it's probably like if you're not going to be enjoying the game and feeling value for money, I think you're better off not buying a ticket. And I suppose that's one thing with GA Go. I will say the criticism it's getting of it, I don't understand it because like it's €80 to watch 40 matches. It comes out with just over €2 a game, and like that Limerick Clare match alone, I won't say it was worth the €80, but like I've watched, I'd say at least 5-6 matches on GA Go so far. I'll definitely watch the 2 on Saturday. Probably watch the Antrim Kilkenny Sunday. So I don't understand the criticism it's getting, to be honest with you, on a personal level. I think that the fact that it's getting good games is used as something to bash it with, but then that's not the GA Go's fault. They only get the games they pitch for. Do you know the kind of way? I think there was kind of an insistence to show the provincial football finals on TV. I think that's kind of the way it seems to be all the time. So I just don't understand the criticism on that basis, to be honest with you. I just think that people think that the GA is going to go, that every station is going to bend over backwards to put all their resources into and their scheduling based on what the GA wants. That's not the way it works. And another thing people don't realize is how much it costs to set up a good quality outside broadcast in terms of paying presenters, commentators, etc., pundits, whatever. So it's not cheap, these things. And no, I think that's something that's getting a bit of an unfair criticism on.
Yeah, I suppose ultimately in Dublin, Wexford, then you're back in Dublin by a point, 2 points.
Very narrow win for Dublin, I'm going to say. But again, I find it very hard to call that game. Wexford have flattered to deceive so far, but I suppose this is kind of a funny game. I suppose for all the criticism that probably added both teams there would maybe a bit unfair, but they will be targeting this game as one that they can really win. But I think Antrim, I suppose, while being negative, just probably Antrim are a team that's made a lot of progress. So I wouldn't be too critical of Dublin not winning that game on the base. I think Antrim are actually fairly good and could they played so bad against Limerick or against Wexford, and still could have come out with the game with something. So Antrim are not. I think Antrim will probably be on. I think Antrim have nearly moved to the stage where they're not really a minnow anymore. They're not the type of team where you take 2 points for granted. Now, having said that, do I think Antrim have a chance of getting it in Salt Hill against Galway? No. Do I think that they'll give Kilkenny a game this weekend? I think they'll put it up to Kilkenny. I don't think they're going to win. I wouldn't be absolutely amazed if it was a draw. I think they could maybe steal something Antrim. I think Kilkenny will. I'd be surprised if Kilkenny won this by double figures, to be honest. I think they'll definitely be single figures, and I think that Antrim will definitely be in the game at halftime, to be honest,
Yeah, and I suppose you were saying there in terms of Westmeath versus Galway, I suppose you spoke a bit about the game there already, but I suppose you were saying, like, from a Westmeath perspective, as a fan and as a Westmeath man yourself, like, it's one of them where you probably can't really get excited for. There probably isn't a huge amount of interest around the county, and obviously when you look through some of the meetings between Westmeath and Galway in the last couple of years, like, it's been 15, 20 points, sometimes even more. And you'd probably imagine it'd be something similar again this weekend.
Yeah, no, Westmeath, I will say one thing, I probably was a bit critical of them there. Joe Fortune's done a superb job, and they do have some very good hurlers who have huge ambitions, who certainly will not be thinking that they're going to get beaten before they go. I just think Killian Doyle is a huge loss to Westmeath, to be honest with you. He is that exceptional talent, but Westmeath are making huge progress, and I suppose the big game there is going to be the Antrim game. Now, that's on the basis that Antrim don't get a point against Kilkenny or Galway. On the base, then it would be Antrim would have 1 and Westmeath would have 0. So that would be a winner-takes-all relegation playoff game in Mullingar in the last round. That'll be Westmeath's focus game to peak for. That will be a good game, but I think this weekend will be too far for Westmeath.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think we're both very much going for a Galway win there by a comfortable distance. Antrim versus Kilkenny, as you were saying. Like, look, Antrim, Antrim, to be fair, like it was a really, really good performance, obviously, against Dublin. They ran Wexford quite close as well, only a couple of points in it going down the home stretch. And as Keane says here, Antrim have performed admirably in their opening 2 games. And even though Cork Park is a tough place for away teams to come away with a win, I can't see anything else but a Kilkenny victory here. And yeah, like I think we would all very much go for a Kilkenny victory. But as you said, like it would be interesting to see how Antrim contest against Kilkenny, and it will be interesting to see like if they, if they can put themselves in the conversation possibly to get out of Leinster. Probably be tough, obviously, following the defeat to Wexford, but you wouldn't entirely rule them out. Like if they can nick something against Kilkenny or Galway, beat Westmeath, then they have a huge chance.
Yeah, I think it's a funny. I think Antrim, the Wexford game was probably one that they needed. They needed probably one win from the first 2 games, unfortunately for them. But that having said that, it kind of makes it a bit more interesting. It kind of takes the pressure off Antrim because they're going up to Kilkenny and they're under absolutely no pressure. Like everyone's thought about the Westmeath match. That's the match they have to win. So it's kind of, if they have won their first 2 matches, then suddenly you're kind of coming to a stage where Kilkenny most certainly would not be taking them lightly. But the fact now that Kilkenny might be taking them a bit less light, whatever, I don't know what the correct turn of phrase is there, but if Kilkenny aren't as tuned in, they could be in for a game. Now, look, I'd be stunned if Antrim won the match, but I don't think we're going to see it. I certainly think it won't be a landslide,
Absolutely. What are you thinking then in terms of points distance, or what are you thinking? Could be 5, 6, maybe more?
Kilkenny beat them by 6 points in the league, and I'm going to just copy that. I'm going to take Kilkenny by 6.
Yeah, I'd probably go for a little bit more. I'd probably go for 8 or 9 points. I think maybe it would have been championship and everything else. And I think Kilkenny, I think it's probably, in some ways, probably good for Kilkenny that they've seen what Antrim done against Wexford and Dublin. I think they'll probably go into this game with their tails up, as opposed to maybe Dublin and Wexford ever so slightly, who probably weren't expecting the strong performances from an Antrim perspective. But yeah, I'd probably say about 8 or 9 points. Maybe we'll go for there. Just looking at some of the games in the Joe McDonagh this weekend. So it's Offaly versus Kerry, Laois versus Kildare, and Down versus Carlow. Offaly and Kerry obviously sitting in the top 2. I've seen, obviously, you did a bit of radio work, obviously, for the Kerry hurlers the last couple of weeks. So, I mean, them going away to Offaly, obviously, like 2 sides that are going very strong in the Joe McDonagh, obviously, at the minute, in the top 2. So that should make for a cracking game.
Yeah, it's an interesting game. Like it's hard to call the Joe McDonagh. Every team is without judging the question. It's a bit like the championship in soccer. Every team is nearly around the same level, and they seem to be dropping points. Like teams are dropping points here and there in draws and everything. So I suppose it's probably expect Laois to be Kildare on current form, and you probably expect Carlow to be down on current form. So that would lead to Kildare down match in the last round as a relegation playoff. And I suppose Offaly Kerry could almost be like a semi-final. If Offaly win, they're probably into the final. If Kerry win, they probably need another point, but Kerry would have 7. So it's very hard to know how it's going to pan out. But I probably fancy Offaly to slightly win that game, to be honest,
Yeah, like, cause I suppose from a Kerry point of view, like they're one of those sides that they nearly remind me a bit of Monaghan in football or Clare in football, where you keep ruling them out and you don't think that they'll be able to keep pulling it off. Like obviously Kerry is, probably 80% football, 20% hurling, maybe even more so of a football county. But like when you look at them, they keep getting to Joe McDonagh Cup finals, they keep producing results, and obviously the next 2 games will be huge for them, like playing Offaly, playing Laois. But they keep progressing, they keep going forward, and like who knows? You wouldn't rule them out getting to another final again.
No, Kerry are the one county where, like, I hate it. Doing good work to promote hurling. They're structurally, they are progressing in hurling, but they're not going to get anywhere near able to compete in the Munster Championship in the next foreseeable future. Like so, but I would absolutely love to see them win a Joe McDonagh Cup, to be honest, and see how it goes. And like it's hard to know. Like to win the Joe McDonagh for Kerry would be a huge thing, and I suppose it's a good advocate the Joe McDonagh for tiered competitions. Like, and I just suppose I know it's hurling talk again, but the Tailteann Cup in football this year, like. There's no outstanding team, but there's about 10 teams that could win that Tailteann Cup in football. So it is going to be a good enough competition. You know the type of way now. Look, it's hard to get excited about the Joe McDonagh. Like, you're not going to get too many neutrals going, but then you probably wouldn't get too many neutrals going to qualifier matches between Division 3 and 4 teams anyway. Or the same in hurling. Like, so I don't think the fact that the Joe McDonagh Cup, it doesn't necessarily change a whole lot that way. But yeah, I think Offaly with the underage is good. Like, they seem to be like Offaly again. I think they're miles off competing for Liam McCarthy level, like even like they're miles off coming in the top 3 in Leinster. But I think that they have a couple of under, and that team is good enough to win a Joe McDonagh Cup in the next couple of years. And I think now, like Laois, the ball is kind of bouncing off his favour a bit. Like with Laois, if Laois have dropped 3 points, so Laois could be out of it even if they win their last 2 games. Do you know? So like, awfully, really, we were thinking like it's probably quite important to live in the present without doing cliches now, but sometimes you can win a competition and go up too early and go back down. Like maybe it is too early for Offaly to win a Joe McDonagh, but whether it's too early or not, it's very much a possibility. Do you know? And I think it's something that they'll think that they will. That like if Offaly get to a final, like they'd have won the league, and with the amount of injuries they have, for Offaly to win a double this year, considering the players they're missing, it'll be a huge statement of intent. Do you know?
Yeah, and I suppose player of the week and bet of the week. I suppose if you were to think, always a tough question to think off the top of your head. There's obviously so much happening all across the weekend. But any players you think might stand out, give top class performances, and any bets or upsets you think might be worth calling?
Like I was going to say Dara Fitzgibbon, but I think the Cork Tipp might have a plan for him. But I'd say player of the week. It's a hard one to. I think probably going to be a left wing choice here. I think if Wexford are going to need to win, Rory O'Connor's going to need to play well. So we'll go Rory O'Connor player of the week. Just with Wexford, himself or maybe Lee Chin if he's back there. I'm going to say a Wexford player in that game. For this weekend for a change. And then the bet of the week, just haven't even looked. Probably
isn't too many, to be fair.
Maybe cheeky fiver and Antrim to beat Kilkenny, whatever the odds are. That could be the bet. Just for an interest bet. Antrim, I'd say Antrim is the interest bet this weekend. Antrim on the handicap, and then if you're looking for a very outside bet, Antrim to win against maybe go Antrim, Dublin, and turn whatever price that is Antrim and Dublin in the double.
Yeah, fair. No, I think if I was to go for a player of the week, probably be Jake Morris maybe for Tipperary. I think would have a huge game, obviously against Cork, and could be decisive. And then for bet of the week, I was thinking Kildare beating Laois might be a good one. Especially with Laois on a bit of a slide at the minute, and Kildare sort of on the up. Although Kildare probably haven't started the Joe McDonagh too well, but yeah, like there probably isn't too many formalities really. And to be fair, there rarely is too many upsets in hurling. But there you go. So yeah, I suppose we'll wrap this up here. Connor, very much appreciate you jumping on, and I suppose for anyone who tuned in, if you could hit the like button and subscribe, would be very much appreciated. And cheers to anyone who tuned in, and thanks very much, Connor, for coming on.
No bother, go back. Cheers, thanks, folks.